Hey friends, today I wanted to talk to you about the number one wedding regret that we hear about online, on Instagram, on Reddit, from friends of ours who got married, from other people. Luckily, not our couples, because we try really hard to not allow this to happen. But the number one wedding regret that we hear about is couples not actually experiencing their wedding day. And the crazy thing is that it normally doesn't hit until the day after that, or the week after your wedding. When all of a sudden you wake up the next day or a week after your wedding and you're laying in bed and you go, oh my God, did that really just happen? Did we really just spend X amount of dollars, probably a large number, a large sum of money? And did we not even get to experience our wedding day? I feel like all I did was run around and be stressed and set up my decor, and I had to do all this stuff, and then pictures. Oh my God, we spent all day taking pictures. And then we got pulled out again for sunset, and then by the time we came back in, half the people had left because we were gone for 45 minutes or 30 minutes or 20 minutes, even that's too long. But all of these things happened, and we didn't even get to experience our wedding day. That's a huge regret that we hear about. And people say something like this: I wish I just would have focused on what truly mattered, and I wish I just would have spent more time with the people that I loved. I didn't even get to talk to my grandma. My Aunt Phyllis was in from out of town. My Uncle Dave, they were here. I didn't even get to see them. My favorite elementary school teacher was here. I didn't even get to talk to her. These are all thoughts that people have, but it's all centered around I didn't get to do what I wanted to do on my wedding day. Which sounds crazy, right? The main point of the wedding day is to get married, and that's gonna happen, but there's a lot of other things that happen before and after that. And if you don't go into your wedding day or even into wedding planning or timeline building, because that's when this truly matters, with the intent of understanding that I'm gonna carve out time in my timeline so that I can spend time the way that I want to spend it, it's not gonna happen. Let me say that again. In a different way, if you are not intentional about how you build your wedding timeline and carving out moments of connection with number one, your fiance, and number two, those that you love, it won't happen. It's not going to happen, because guess what? You're going to end up doing all the other things that you don't necessarily want to do, unless you know that there's this gravitational force that pulls you in a different direction, that wants you to do everything that you don't really want to do on your wedding day. And the way that you kind of overcome that is having this intentionality centered mindset, so that you know this is what I want to do. Because when you can protect that wedding why that we've talked about, and you can protect and carve out time for your loved ones, it's going to happen. If you go into it knowing that there's a potential that it won't happen, you will do everything in your power to overcome it so that it doesn't happen, and that you can spend the day the way that you actually want to spend it. So, with that being said, I want to talk about two main things that will help you experience your wedding day and not have the regret of being wow, I didn't even get to have fun on my wedding day. It was just pictures all day, and it was just all serious stuff. Here's how you do that. Number one, you hire a wedding photographer that wants you to experience your wedding day more than they want to take photos of you. That might sound a little backwards, but I'll unpack that. And number two, you build a wedding timeline that carves out time for moments of connection between you and your fiance and your loved ones and your friends. Because if you don't intentionally carve it out, it's not going to happen. So let's go back to that point about a wedding photographer. People don't realize this, but your wedding photographer actually has way more power than you think that they have. Your wedding photographer can actually enable you to have the best day of your life, and be sure that you're there to connect with those that the ones that you love, your friends, your family, all of those things. Your wedding photographer actually has the power. Let me rephrase that. Let me think about this. Your wedding photographer actually has the power to control whether or not you and your fiance get to experience your wedding day. That's kind of crazy, right? And even kind of a scary thought. Because let's say you only have 10 minutes in your timeline because things ran hectic for bride and groom photos. But maybe you took a risk on a wedding photographer and they're not as confident in what they can do in 10 minutes, and they end up spending 30 minutes. And now that's pushed everything back, and there's still other things to be done. But guess what? Like, you got to get those photos. Like, you got to get them. And then let's say that, you only have 10 minutes carved out to go out for sunset, but you're gone for 45. And guys, that's a real story that I hear way too often. A photographer keeping a couple outside for sunset way longer than they should be. And then guess what? You go inside, and all that you see is half of your wedding reception is gone because your wedding photographer kept you outside way longer than you should have been. Your wedding photographer has the power to control whether or not you get to experience your wedding day the way that you want to. Now that you've been made aware of that, you can actually use that as a talking point for when you're interviewing photographers. You could say something like, hey, just so you know, like, me and my fiance, like, we really value photography and it's really important to us, but we also value experiencing our wedding day. If we're running behind on the timeline, how do you catch back up? Or you can say, like, hey, do you support us? Like, we want to spend, a total of X amount of time doing bride and groom photos, X amount of time doing wedding party, and then bride and bridesmaids, and then groom and groomsmen. And we only want to spend 10 minutes at sunset. We only want to spend 5 minutes at sunset. Like, those kinds of things, asking those specific questions and see how they respond. Because if they respond with something like, hey, you're probably going to need to be out there for at least 30 minutes. And if that's not something that you want to do, then you don't have to agree to that. Right? Like, you don't have to agree to allowing that happen. And you can go find a wedding photographer who's going to support you and who is also going to value the way that you experience your wedding day. So important, so key. And I don't say that to, like, diss other wedding photographers, because I do think it's gotten a lot better. Especially, I feel like there's a really big intentionality movement right now within wedding planning and weddings. And so there's a lot of photographers that have this mindset. But there are a lot of photographers who don't have this mindset as well. And so I just want to make you aware of that. Second thing, it's building a timeline that is going to allow for you to experience your day. Here's what that means. You have buffer room in your day. Your timeline is not jam-packed from the moment that you show up till the time that you leave. Like, when we build our timelines as Chris and Lara, we always like to carve out time, like way more buffer time than is needed. And I know that sometimes, like we explain to our couples, hey, this is going to help you because you're going to have some downtime. You're actually going to have time to spend with one another, and especially if you don't do a first look, like, you're really not going to have time. So there are some moments during the day that naturally lend themselves for downtime for couples. And so let me share a few of them with you. We always, like, if the bride has a mother and if she's there that day, after the bride gets into her dress and after she's zipped up, it's so easy to move on to the next thing. It's so easy. But we intentionally stop and recognize that mom probably has so many emotions that she's holding inside and just has to keep them put together because of the makeup. Newsflash, makeup can always be touched up. Like, you should never just have to hold in your emotions. I get it. We paid a lot of money for makeup, but also you shouldn't have to just hold in your emotions. So we always stop everything that's happening there in that moment and say, Mom, go ahead and face daughter. Get a good look at her. Take it in. Look at how beautiful she is. And we just let them have a moment and slow the day down. We say, you guys have a moment together. We're going to photograph it for about a minute or so, and then we're going to get out of your hair. And we give them 4 or 5 minutes alone. Same thing with dad, if dad has a first look with bride. Same thing with mom after she pins the boutonniere on her son. Same thing with dad after he helps him get dressed and get ready. Like, these are all things that are, like, lend themselves to having a moment. It doesn't have to be 30 minutes. You'd be surprised what 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes can do to just not have the cameras on someone and let them be present in that moment. Another one is after the first look. If a couple decides to do a first look, we will photograph the first look. We'll do that for 2 minutes, and then we'll say, hey guys, we're going to give you guys a moment alone to just be. You guys can have 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You just let us know. And a lot of times we've discussed that kind of ahead of time to know how long they want. And so we give them that time. We photograph it. We'll back off. Maybe we'll come back 5 minutes later and just get a couple like far off shots, but then we'll give them space to breathe, to have those moments. Another great time is after the ceremony, right before family photos. Another time is right before the grand entrance. Get there 15 minutes before the grand entrance and let the bride and groom have some time alone. Another time is right after dinner is done. Bride and groom can go have some time alone. You can carve out these moments in your day, and you can build your wedding timeline in a way that your time and your memories aren't monopolized by photography. And I know I'm going in and I'm kind of going hard on photography, but I've seen these things done, and I've seen couples not be able to experience their day because they have to go do this photo, because they have to go do that photo, because they have to go and do this. And they're like, they don't want to go, and they shouldn't have to go. There's all sorts of other things that happen, but I really wanted to hone in on photography and building a wedding timeline centered around photography not dictating your day. Because if you do that, guys, I promise you, your day will be full of so much joy, and you most likely will not wake up with that wedding regret of not even being able to talk to your 4th grade teacher that showed up to your wedding. That's something that you shouldn't have to not do because you got to run off to sunset photos. And I get it. I love the sunset photos. Love them all. I'd do it an hour if I could. The biggest win for us at the end of the day is we look at our couples. When Lara and I get in the car after wedding day, we look at our couples, we look at each other and ask ourselves this question. And this question determines whether or not the wedding day was a success or not as successful. Did our couple get to experience their wedding day? And we've worked really hard and got a pretty good system down to where that answer is almost always a yes. And so I want to encourage you to build a timeline that reflects how you want to spend your wedding day. Now, I will say this. If you're someone who wants all the photos, who wants to be gone for X amount of time during sunset because you value photographies and you have a vision, do that too. But also know that when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. Keep that in mind when you're building a timeline. When you say yes to not doing a first look, you're saying no to more time with your fiance earlier in the day. When you say yes to a sparkler exit and you have to shift your coverage, you're saying no to some of those early candid moments that you're having on the wedding day. When you say yes to something, you're also saying no to something else. So, as always, guys, we hope this was helpful. Let us know your thoughts. Drop them in the comments below. We'd love to hear any ideas or thoughts that you had as I'm talking about this topic. Let us know. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Give us a follow on Instagram. And, as always, we hope that this information was helpful. Happy wedding planning.